weapon that you had to keep clean if you wanted it to fire properly.
But in a given squad of Marines, were there more than one BAR men, or was there one assigned to each squad?
There was probably 2 BARs to each squad in the platoon.
Squad being how many men?
Oh, about 12 people, something like that, maybe 15, something like that. I don't remember exactly how many. So we had enough firepower, plus we had machine guns that were part of the complement also. So we had plenty of firepower. There's no doubt about that. When we left and we talked and we arrived at Iwo on the night of the 18th, they got us up real early the next morning. They had steak and eggs, and daylight. We got to go up on top side and look around. And it started getting light, and you could see the island of Iwo out there.
Was it being bombarded at that time?
Yes. It was amazing how many ships were out there. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, destroyer escorts. The whole sea, as far as you could see, was ships. And the 4th Division had joined us at that point in time. And they were to land on the north end of the strip, landing strip. The big guns from the battleships were pounding Iwo. And for several months before that, our aircraft had dropped bombs in there. And it was said that there was more bombing done on Iwo than all the other islands put together that we had hit. Little did we know that this bombing wasn't doing a bit of good, because all the Japs had to do was go into the caves or in the underground tunnels that they'd built. So it did little damage as far as personnel-wise.
But the location of Iwo Jima was critical, was it not, to the continuing bombing of Japan? It was so much closer than Guam, Saipan, or Tinian among those.
Yeah, the basic reason for getting Iwo was the fact that the B-29s going from Saipan to Japan to bomb, a good majority of them wouldn't make it back to their home base due to being hit by shrapnel or anti-aircraft guns. And the B-29 had a bad record of engine failure. So the only thing that they could do if they was in trouble was land in the ocean, and then they would probably never be picked up. Iwo gave them a place to land where they could do repairs, gas up again, and it's told that many thousands of Air Force personnel were saved just for the fact that they had the place to land on Iwo. So it was well worth the loss of life.
It almost took the place of an aircraft carrier that would be out in the ocean, but in this case it was a permanent base.
Right, it's a good acronym to see, yeah. Yeah, because it saved a lot of aircraft, a lot of aircraft personnel.
Now, what was it like to approach the island from the sea, knowing that it was well defended, that even though it had been shelled many times over by ships at sea and/or bombs from the air, as you're approaching that volcanic shoreline, tell us how you felt as you're approaching the island.
Well, you'll probably laugh at what I say. Okay. The only thing I could think of heading for that beach was get this Higgins boat on dry land so I wouldn't get my feet wet. And that was my attitude that I had when we hit Iwo and throughout the campaign. Like I say, maybe one time I was scared, but I don't recall it. Well, when I seen one of my buddies hit in the rear end, he just went crazy, crying and screaming and everything. I had hurt, I'm sure, but I swore to myself at that point in time that when I got hit, and if I did, that I would never crack up or go in this state of shock. I just refused to do that. And I think this attitude helped me through the campaign, really.
Were any of the landing craft coming in, though, hit by Japanese mortar or artillery? Did you see any of this in front of you as you were approaching land?
I didn't see it personally. Films that I've seen since then, I've seen where shells landed right in the middle of a Higgins boat and blow everything out. By the time we landed on the 11th wave, there was Higgins boats on the beach, tanks, other armored vehicles that was just blown up. And after I had landed, a few waves after that, it was having trouble finding a place where Higgins boats could drop the troops off.
The beach was real crowded.
Right. Luckily, when I hit the beach, I got there and on dry land. The first waves that went in put white tape around the anti-tank mines that was on the beach. It was a good size half-moon shape with two prongs going out the side. And old Pebbles, he heads right towards one, but I jumped right through the two prongs and continued on.
So you didn't get your feet wet after all.
Right. And some of my buddies told me afterwards that they yelled at me and they hugged the ground because they figured I was going to blow that landmine up. But the beach was crowded. It took a long time for everybody to move out. There was a lot of them that got up finally and started advancing across the island. But there was still a lot that was never move again. And they was there. They was killed. And the beach was pretty well littered with our dead already. The 27th and the 28th Marines was to cut across the neck of the island and isolate Mount Suribachi from the northern portion of the island. And on day 2, the 28th Marines was to head south and take Mount Suribachi, and the 27th Marines was to head north and tie up with 4th Division.
Did you sleep well the first night?
No, you never sleep well because you're always getting incoming rounds from mortars and so on. First night we dug in with 2-man foxholes. One would sleep, one would stay on watch. And there's no movement except corpsmen when somebody needed a corpsman. And they were given a password, usually a president's name, and so people wouldn't fire on them when they seen the movement. We had one Marine as he was crossing the island on the first day. He picked up a Thompson submachine gun, and he cleaned it up real good and everything, and that night he seen movement out there. He fired that thing 7 times, and it misfired each time. And then we found out that that was one of our outposts that was watching for any banzai attacks or counterattacks during the night. Next morning, woke up and he looked at it and pulled the trigger and it started firing right away. Now, if that ain't fate, I don't know what it is.
He would have killed his own men.
Right, yeah.
And in worse trouble then.
On the first day, we had 2 men wounded and 2 men killed in our platoon. And on the second day, the 27th, 1st Battalion and 2nd Battalion was to lead the charge going north. And our 3rd Battalion was kind of in reserve in case of a counterattack. We was there right behind them just in case to help prevent any advancement through our lines.
So your goal at that time, Gene, was to go up the far side of the island,
right,
towards the airfield, or had that airfield already been?
No, we was right at the beginning of the airfield, low side of the airfield. Mm-hmm. And we was to go forward and join up then with the 4th Division on the right side of the island. Our platoon was on the rim of a big bomb crater about 20 feet wide and 20 feet deep. And some of our platoon had already tried to cross the airfield and was forced back. And a good Liberty friend of mine came running over the edge and down to the bottom of the crater. And Corbin started working on him right away, but he died almost immediately. And that was my first taste of death of a close friend on Iwo.
And were you able to control your emotions at that point, or what sort of reaction did you have?
You had a sad feeling, and I don't know, I don't remember that I cried or anything, but yeah, you felt the death. It bothered you, but it didn't affect what you had to do. All right, it didn't affect me for what we knew we had to do. We tried to get tank support up to help us across this little part of the airstrip, and they was busy elsewhere, and they told us we had to move out. So I got up when it was my turn, my trusty BAR, and got about halfway across the airstrip, and machine gun was taking off after me. And I seen a little knee mortar hole up there, and I dove for it. Of course, all I could get in there was my belly, nothing else, and which wasn't a whole lot of protection. And the machine gun came across me again. Two guys fell behind me, and I looked back and asked them if they was all right. And it was a corpsman and another Marine. There's no, we're fine. We're just hiding behind you, Pebbles. Then he came across me again and knocked asphalt in my neck here, and it was time to leave that spot. So I started running across the airfield, and I happened to look down at my feet, and the bullets was just hitting right at my feet. And I don't know if I was scared then or what happened, but I just stopped and hesitated for a moment. Of course, he kept going with his gun. And when I took off again, he never did catch me, and I was glad of that. We made a small advancement that day, and I think we ended up with, in our platoon, we had 3 killed and 4 wounded on the second day. Third day, the weather got pretty bad, and it was overcast. We had heavy resistance, but we did make about 1,000 yards that third day.
It's just a little over half a mile.
Right.
For the whole day.
Right. And we came across a lot of caves, a lot of concrete emplacements and everything.
Did you use flamethrowers in the event of coming upon a cave? Or
right. We had flamethrowers, and one of the men in our platoon was named Max, had it. He eventually got Bronze Star for all he did. But after we gained that 1,000 yards, we decided we would dig in, and we'd gone far enough that day. But after a fellow named Stensis and myself dug a foxhole on a slight incline, and Corporal Olson, he was just above me a little bit in another foxhole. And we had another heavy counterattack that hit our platoon directly. And I'm firing away with my BAR. Every 5th round in there was a tracer bullet. And I was shooting at what I thought was a cave, so I could tell I was right on target. And I happened to turn around, and Stensis had his helmet knocked off, and a hunk of his skull was completely off, and you could see his brain. He was still alive. His eyes were closed, but Olson gave him some gum and told him to chew it like mad, and we kept at him, keep chewing, and we bandaged up his head the best we could. Cormans was busy all over the place and couldn't get over to us. We tried to get a stretcher bearer up there, and they were hard to come by. They were taking just as much of beating as everybody else because they was right out in the open, standing up, moving the wounded back to the aid station. So we loaded Stensis up on his poncho and carried him back about 200 yards to where we finally seen a stretcher bearer, and he took him back to the aid station. We learned later, several weeks later, that they'd put a steel plate in his head and he was still alive, and I don't know how he did it. But we just kept at him, chew that gum, just to keep him active and his mind thinking. And we went back, and it was pretty well quieted down by the time we got back to our foxhole. That third day, I think we had 3 killed and 5 wounded in our platoon. On the 4th day, it really came overcast, and we was approaching airfield number 2, and we didn't make too much of a gain that day, but we had got word that there was about 109 in our battalion that was wounded that day. And we was lucky and just had 3 wounded on the third day.
Now, as far as replacing those in the platoon, were others coming in to join?
Yeah, we had raw recruits that they tried to replace us as best as they could. The 3rd Marine Division that had been left out at sea and was not supposed to land because it was supposed to be a 3-day affair. And they had finally landed because we need all 3 divisions.
They were the reserves
right.
Coming in finally.
Yeah. You know, the 5th day was cold, wet, and foggy, and made very little gain that day. But one time when we stopped, somebody had a telescope, and I asked if I could use it. And I happened to be looking around, and I focused in on Mount Suribachi, and there was a flag.
The famous flag raising on top of Suribachi.
Everybody stood up and screamed and laughed. Man, this is just about over.
Yeah.
Little we knew it just started.
Yeah. Ways to go.
But 5th day we had just 1 wounded, but we've been hit pretty hard, and we was put in reserves for the next 4 days. We dug little larger foxholes so we'd be a little more comfortable.
So when you say in reserve, you were moved back off the front line?
No, we just stayed where we are, and the others advanced in front of us. Right, yeah.
Okay.
Never retreat on a Marine.
No going back, always forward.
But started digging our foxholes, and it was just like digging in a barrel of wheat. Sand, it was so soft and sandy, it just kept caving in. And our foxhole ended up being almost 5 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 4 or 4.5 feet deep.
Did you try to board it up? Was there anything to
Well, we didn't have anything to do that. We finally got it where it was livable. And it started pouring down rain. And in one corner, the dirt fell off, and there was a big bomb that hadn't gone off. So we can't stay in this foxhole with that dud there. So we move over 6 or 8 feet and dig another foxhole the same size. Like that would do us any good if it went off. But the next morning we got up, and we was taking fire, and especially towards the beach. They was lobbing artillery down there. And a truck pulled up. We just on a slight rise, and just down below was the road that went alongside the airfields. And a truck pulled up there, and it was an open bed truck with supplies. 2 Marines were in there, and I was watching them unload the bullets and stuff that they had in there, food, whatever was in there. And a shell lit right in the middle of the truck and just blew them right out of the bed. We never heard, but I'm sure that they were killed when they blew. It couldn't have helped because the ammunition blew up and everything else. The next day, 3 tanks came up to the same place, and the same artillery knocked all